Interfaith Action, as I said, is mobilizing the untapped volunteer labor potential of faith community volunteers who are looking for ways to be effective. And because this is about faith, in each one of our sessions, we learn about something substantive like we just did about poverty or our community or skills to do our work. And then we have an interfaith text study session that'll be about 25 minutes. And so, or 30 minutes. And so I am gonna throw to Sarah to introduce tonight's interfaith text study session.
Awesome. Thank you, Randy. Again, I want to just share my thanks to the panel as well. Tonight, I have the privilege of introducing Reverend Julie Naris. She's an ordained Presbyterian minister and spiritual director for more than 35 years. Julie has a particular interest in helping busy people find regular spiritual practice. None of us are busy, are we? No. She's an associate professor in interdisciplinary graduate program at Hamline University, and she has many different course programs that she draws from her inspiration through theology, mythology, psychology, the arts, and writers. Please welcome Julie Naris. And Julie, I will have you I will unmute your phone in just a second and highlight you. We've got a little technical hoop we're gonna jump through here. Julie, I think you have to unmute your phone yourself. 1 second, friends.
Okay, did it work?
There we go. Yep, it works.
Oh, good, good. Well, let me say, Shirley and company, I just feel deeply humbled by what you've just shared. I mean, I have no idea how you make it past your father being murdered on your graduation day and, you know, being rebuffed and turned back at every turn again and again and again, trying to support Black farmers. I mean, I've written 2 books about hope, right? And if I have any credibility around hope, it has to do with having chronic illness. But I just think it must be impossible to go on, you know, without much help. So I'm pondering where to go here. But can you hear me? It says I'm muted now.
Julie, your phone is unmuted, so you're good.
Okay.
So we're hearing you through your phone.
Okay. You know,
you can look at your camera, Julie.
Oh, okay.
There you go. Perfect.
I have to say, you know, as a teacher, spiritual director, retreat leader type person, I'm often turning to poetry to start a conversation. And I was just blown away by 22-year-old Amanda Gorman's poem yesterday. And I don't know, I just feel such hope in this next generation, but surely you and others have just continued when there hasn't been much hope. And I just want to be your student. Somebody has asked me, well, okay, you wrote 2 poems about hope. What would you say hope is about? I say, well, hope is the sense of a way forward. You know, it's the sense that things can work out or you'll find the resources you need. But frankly, I think it's really hard to hope if there isn't any help. And that's what brings me to the text study that I thought would be, you know, meaningful tonight. And it's certainly morphed in the hour I've been listening to you. But I want to focus on one word from the book of Exodus. And I think the couple of reasons for choosing this passage. One, it's timely. We've just watched this inauguration of a new president and vice president. We know how much work lies not only ahead of them, but of us. There's a little humor about it, and who couldn't use a little humor about now? And thirdly, I find it really a very intriguing passage in the Bible, and I'm sure even though we only have 6 to 8 minutes for you to talk about it directly, I hope there's something in this for you. So let me say that two things. As a Christian, I owe to Judaism the notion that God has a stake in human history. You know, that God is involved in human history. There was a beloved professor at Jewish Theological Seminary named Ismar Schorsch, and he said, I'm going to get his words, so I'm quoting him. In truth, Judaism is one large and daring effort to shift the ground of religion from nature to history, from changes in the seasons of the year to the destiny of a nation. It's a pretty remarkable claim to say that God has an interest in our lives, individually and collectively. But we also owe to Judaism the awareness that God needs our partnership, and we need God's partnership in the work of healing creation. And the notion that the reason we're here as human beings is to help God in this healing, which, of course, in Hebrew, you've heard the term tikkun olam. So there's one line I want to focus on in a story from Exodus 14. But let me set the stage here for what's happening. So the king of Egypt finally has released the Jews from bondage after perhaps 400 plus years. But he had a change of heart after he had done this and sent his 600 chariots after the Jews. They were panicked, and they do what frightened people sometimes do when they're panicked, which is to yell and scream at their leader. So here they are, chased by the chariots, and they're squashed between the army and the Red Sea. And the Egyptians are advancing on them, and in great fear, they cry out and they say to Moses, was it because there were no more graves in Egypt that you've taken us away to die in the wilderness? What have you done to us, bringing us out of Egypt? It would have been better for us to serve the Egyptians than to die here. But Moses, ever the patient leader, says to the people, don't be afraid, stand firm, and see the deliverance that the Lord will accomplish for you today. And then here is one zinger of a line. God says to Moses, why are the people crying out to me? Tell them to step forward. Then Moses is supposed to lift up his staff and stretch out his hand over the sea to divide it. Why are the people yelling at me? Tell them to go forward. What a line. You know, who knows exactly what happened there? Did those ancient people have the good fortune of being aided by a sandbar that helped them flee Pharaoh? Could there have been a strong wind that somehow shifted the water and made it passable? Whatever it was, they had to participate in their own exodus. And surely I can only imagine how many times you had to keep returning again and again to the work that you had to do and felt called to do, even though maybe there wasn't much help to be found. You know, but in the commentary of the Oxford Annotated Version of the Bible, chapters that cover this story from chapter 13 to 15 have been called God Rescues Israel at Sea. But I don't think it was quite that simple. I mean, they had to rise up to meet God by following God's lead. And they weren't going to be helicoptered over the problem or ferried around the problem. They had to participate in their own exodus. I don't know. I have been haunted by drug violence for a number of years. Not drug violence, that too, but gun violence. And every year we keep going to the Capitol again and again and again. And we don't seem to be making any movement. But you keep showing up, right? And you meet people who have been faithful for years and years and years. A group of Jewish women one time were ahead of us with this banner, that kind of like a banner that you carry in a parade. And they said, well, we have been coming for 20 years to work on behalf of against gun violence and common sense gun rules. And another woman once, we were waiting for a hearing room, and she went to the microphone and sort of, humbly said that she'd been coming for 27 years, from when the time that her sister was killed by her husband with a gun. So, blessings and cheers and gratitude to people who keep staying faithful, even when it doesn't seem like much is happening. A quick little story to anchor that idea, and then I'm curious about your thoughts here. I was a chaplain at St. Mary's Treatment Center in Minneapolis, working with people who were struggling with drug addiction and chemical dependency, alcohol. For 2 years, I worked with kids. For 2 years, I worked with adults. And I do remember the day when this middle-aged man from somewhere in the Midwest, who said something like this on his last day of treatment, damn it all, anyway, I have been here for 28 days. I spent nearly $30,000, and I thought I could buy my sobriety. But his fellow strugglers said, no, you're going to have to earn it step by step by step. I don't mean to imply that it's all up to us. Many a struggling addict who has found some semblance of sobriety, would tell you that. And a lot of people showed me this. You've seen this visual too. There's a picture of a set of footsteps in the sand, and they make quite a long track, but then there's a gap in the picture where the footprints disappear because the people were carried by, a mercy, a grace beyond their own. So I'm really curious about your own experience of having to participate in your own exodus. Like those ancient Jews, it must have felt like a complete death wish to step into that sea. It looked like the path of liberation, but how do you know? They could just as easily have drowned. So I invite you to talk about, when you have felt like your own human efforts were somehow joined by a power beyond your own, that you felt like there is something here that is helping in our crossing. There's something helping. So what have we? 8:11. So let's come back in about 6 minutes. Sarah or somebody's going to move us into small groups. And then we'll gather the collective wisdom and kind of glean from everybody's conversation before we close. Okay?
We are going to welcome an impromptu closing speaker here, who is actually our curator for our Interfaith Text Study from Hamline University, a dear friend of Interfaith Action. I'm going to find him on my screen to highlight him. There he is. Spotlight so everyone can see Earl Schwartz. I just found out that Earl has a little history with Shirley Sherrod as well. I see Shirley's big smile right now too. So Earl, why don't you, I hear you have some stuff to share with us. So why don't you go ahead, and you are unmuted, so please share.
Thank you, Sarah. Good evening. Good evening, friends. My deepest appreciation for this evening's presentations and conversation. How wonderfully inspiring and touching for me to share these moments again with people who have inspired me along the way. Randy, a few moments ago, asked if I would very briefly relate a bit of a story about the charades, Shirley and Charles. It has to do with a bit of teaching that I did some 30 years ago now with a group of young Jewish students who were preparing, as they simply expected that Jews would do, to celebrate yet another Passover. These children knew that the center of a Jewish Passover celebration is to retell the story of the liberation of our people from enslavement in Egypt. But I was concerned that that retelling was ever more distant from their own lives, their own circumstances, their own experience, that it was a story about other people, people they could never know, people so distant and unrelated to them. Strange as it would seem, their story couldn't possibly be about them. And so, as a way of helping them to prepare, I arranged for students to write letters to a number of people around the world, people they had never met, and to ask, did the story of the Exodus of the people of Israel from slavery in Egypt play any role in your life? As I said, these 9 and 10 and 11-year-old Jewish children wrote to people with no expectation of how they might in fact receive a response of meaning and significance in light of their own experience. And yet, within a few weeks, the responses began to return. And among the correspondents was Charles Sherrod, Shirley's dear husband. We've heard a bit about him this evening. His courage, his fortitude, his commitments, his conviction. Charles Sherrod responded to a little Jewish child in St. Paul, Minnesota, who asked him, did the story of the Exodus of the people of Israel play any role in your life? And in light of the text that Julie has presented for us this evening, that crucial moment when the Exodus could have failed, when the people of Israel could have said, this, as Julie emphasized, this is utterly hopeless. And Moses says, God help us. And God says, the people have to take the next step for themselves. Tell the people, step forward. Charles Sherrod responded to this Jewish child in St. Paul with a deeply inspiring rendering of the way in which, in his most frightening and difficult moments in the civil rights movement, the story of liberation of the people of Israel carried him, lifted him up under the most difficult circumstances, and brought him to the day when they, that is Charles Sherrod and his correspondent, could meet. I wish I could show you the letter here. Like things that are precious, I put it away so carefully. I couldn't find it quickly enough, but I've treasured it ever after. Charles Sherrod taught the Jewish children who read his letter an important lesson, a lesson that undoubtedly changed their sense of what a story can mean, what the story of the Exodus from Egypt could mean for a man like Charles Sherrod and for them. And with that, I would turn things back to Sarah.
What a story.
That is a great story. And it ties so perfectly with Julie's text. And when I quietly heard about it in the background of this Zoom, I was like, I need Earl to tell the story. So sorry, Julie, that was a change in plan.
No.
But it was a beautiful story, Earl. And so I appreciate that. Folks, I want to wrap by saying we've had an amazing week, celebrating Martin Luther King Jr.'s birthday, an inauguration, a tech study where we got to learn and hear the stories, hear first accounts and hear about farmers and their stories from Shirley, from Stephen, moderated beautifully by Dr. Uhuru Williams, who has been just a constant in our teaching and learning here at Interfaith Action. We will be sending the link for the recording out to you all. The chat was full of resources. I will make sure those go out to you as well, including any other resources that we receive from our panelists and our presenters tonight. Thank you all. We appreciate you being with us tonight. We appreciate your support of Interfaith Action and Opportunity St. Paul. We wish you well, stay warm and be well. And we will see you in February for another Interfaith Action Learning Community event. So thank you all and have a wonderful evening.
Thank you.
All right, let's all do the Zoom wave.